And Benjamin also says, is Aum the sound God made when he made the universe? In a word, yes. But is it the only one? No. But yes. Well, it's the Aum of life. And Aum is the mantra of the heart chakra. The lungs, right? The thymus gland and the heart and the solar plexus and the sexual organs, because the heart chakra is an enormous chakra. But the other mantra that God would have used would have been the mantra that we use here, is Iao, which is the crown chakra, the third eye, and the thymus gland and the heart. So you may have heard the mantra Iaoms. This is James, the brother of Jesus, because Iago, right, is James, and Iaoms. These are all the primary mantras. Some people do it like this, Iaoms, right? Because they do it in order. But there's no particular reason why you have to do it in order. And besides, the throat chakra is very related to the sexual organs. So it's properly located in the order here between the sexual organs and the root chakra. Because, again, we shouldn't have to say this, but the mouth, the oral cavity, is related to sexuality. Obviously, we should not have to spell that out because it's the creative verb, right? It's how we create. Even God created with the Word. In the beginning was the Word was with God, and the Word was God. And we create with prayer, we create with mantra, and that's why we should probably take this moment to, a lot of you will not want to hear this because, well, for obvious reasons. But when it comes to infra-sexuality, oral sex belongs down here. A lot of you will not want to hear that, but that's where oral sex belongs, because there is no way to rationalize your way out of this fact that the sexual energy flows in the wrong direction during oral sex. There's no avoiding it. There's no getting around this fact. Oral sex is motivated by lust, fear, and pride, because fear is control. And oral sex has no spiritual benefit whatsoever in terms of raising kundalini or awakening kundalini, or oral sex really only has one outcome. It really only has one purpose, and that's to stimulate, and that's to lead to an orgasm. And all the other psychological and pseudo-sexual dynamics taking place between the couple via that practice, all the mind games and all the other stuff that's going on and taking place. It is what it is. But what we said here about the mantra related with the throat is, the throat is highly sexual in nature. We create, we sing, we speak, we create truth through our voice. And we also receive, because the throat is the esoteric ear. Well, look, it's not by accident that we are here teaching the Aum of life, the analogous ultimate methodology, and it is Aum. And not only did God create the universe that way, what we've taught you time and time and time again is that he continually creates the universe that way through us, through all of our actions, through our living the Aum of life in the resonant vibrations of that. We are creating the universe and we are creating reality through the Aum of life, and all phenomenon are coming into being or out of being through the Aum of life. This is why we said in the short answer is yes, God creates the universe through the mantra Aum. But that's a kind of a simple, simplistic way. It's much more elaborate and voluptuous than that. But it still comes down to the Aum of life. It still comes down to that spiral shape that you see in our logo, right? The Christ that upholds Aum. Tiffany says, I had a feeling oral sex was purely a sensational act and not that of divinity. I mean, think about it. For one, what do we biologically do there? Emit waste from the body. On that note, that's true. We hope it also goes without saying. Now, this won't be as difficult for for many, but we can also put down here, if you're a Gnostic and you're practicing scientific chastity, which means you're not fornicating, you're not masturbating, and if you're single and all you have is pranayama, no matter what, you're going to be accumulating a lot of sexual energy within you. And what happens is we have wet dreams because succubi come in the middle of the night to fornicate with us, to steal our energy. Succubi are entities, jinn basically, in the fourth dimension, mechanical entities, parasites. They're also known as astral larvae. They come in the fourth dimension, fifth dimension, and they feed on men. And what do? 99% of the time, they come and they perform oral sex while we sleep, because they know that's the quickest, easiest way to get what they want from a man. It's also the quickest, easiest way for a woman to orgasm, albeit, in fairness, it's a clitoral orgasm, not a vaginal orgasm, but regardless. How do you know when to end? How do you know when to stop? If there's no orgasm, how do you know when it's over? Your session of White Tantra. You know when sex is over. You know when fornicating is over. That's obvious. If you're transmuting the sexual force, the man, he won't lose his erection. He will maintain his erection, but that erection will get smaller. It will become smaller. It will become less turgid. It will become softer, in other words, but he won't become flaccid because he won't be releasing the sexual energy. He's going to be transmuting it. And transmutation is a slow and steady process, right? At the risk of sounding crass here, but it is what it is. You begin, full size and full rigidity, and during the course of your prayer and your mantralizing and your kissing and your lovemaking and doing the ebb and flow, right, and building up and transmuting and building up and transmuting, but keeping within the safe zone, eventually you will reduce down to half the size that you began with, but you'll still technically have an erection. It's just because the energy is being transmuted, not wasted, not lost, not spent. So you don't go flaccid like after an orgasm. No, you still have an erection. You're still aroused. You just don't have as much energy to work with anymore because you're transmuting it. So eventually you and your partner just come to a point where you're still engaged in coitus. You're holding each other, you're looking at each other, you're staring into each other's eyes, and you're kissing and you're caressing and everything else. And you basically just say, are we done? You just decide, we had a good session here. We did good work. We had a beautiful experience. And it just tapers off, really, because as the energy is being transmuted, and it's all in your heart, and your hearts will be glowing, and you'll be so filled with love, and lust will be so far from your mind at that point, and it'll just be this beautiful, tender moment that you share with your partner, and you agree that we're done now, and you withdraw, and then you do whatever you normally do following this type of thing. You hold each other and do whatever you do in those moments of intimacy after completing the act. Only you've completed the act, but you've transmuted the energy. You haven't expelled it. So there's nothing to clean up, to be crass. There's one other thing you want to do, though. And it's something that we've shared before, and we share it again because it's important. Anytime you finish any type of meditation or any type of spiritual practice, it's good to seal your work with the macrocosmic star. Here it is. Okay, it's the pentagram and it's the tetragram. But there is a way to perform this physically, and here it is here. Okay, so we're going to share this link. There is a video here on YouTube that shows the macrocosmic star, and we can even there. So you say Klim Krishnaya Govindaya Gopijana Vaya Swaha. Okay, you can watch this on your own time. You can read all the explanations, But this is something that you and your partner can do. White Tantra, it's recommended, it's beneficial. In fact, this is something you should do when you do your meditations, or if you do your mantra work, or do runes, or any other practice of any kind. The macrocosmic star is a good way to complete your work. Tiffany says, can't we release this built-up reservoir of energy through creating things or being of service, expending the energy in other ways? Yes. Okay. You're not expending the energy, you're also transmuting it by creating beautiful things or serving others. Yes, absolutely. In fact, you will find that that's the case, that if you keep yourself busy with work, like if you're following your bliss, you can only do that with the creative force that you have. It's the sexual energy that you have that you live your bliss with. And if you're meditating, if you're exploring your abyss, right? You're practicing self-observation and self-remembering. That is all using energy. That's all using your sexual energy, which is why when you're living on purpose, when you're living on point, you won't have a lot of spare energy. You won't have a lot of energy to waste on things like binging Netflix shows or playing video games for hours on end. You just won't have the energy for it. Like, so what we're doing nowadays with these 3-hour, 4-hour live streams, and then we're cutting them into those short videos and we're releasing them throughout the week, and we're doing all our other stuff. And then when we were writing our book, rest assured that we had very few nocturnal pollutions. That's another name for wet dream, nocturnal pollutions. We had very, very few because, like you said, it's exactly as Tiffany says here. It's like you said, we had very little energy left in reserve because we were using it all in creative ways to write our book and to make these videos and to do these live streams, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yes, you're absolutely correct on that point. But remember too, that, see, those are creative ways that you're using your energy. You're transmuting your energy in that way, like helping others. The energy is flowing up an atom when you do that. Yes, it's being used, but it's used in a positive way. You can also expend the energy in a negative way. You can do too much exercise, right? You can do too much television. You can do too much gossiping. You can do too much cleaning. You can do too much of anything. And then, of course, you're just expending the energy, but in a mechanical, not a productive way necessarily. I mean, it's productive from a mechanical, materialistic point of view, but not productive spiritually, right? And Tiffany says, agreed. I feel like I don't want many things I used to since I started pursuing purpose. I, like you, reiterate bliss here because that's what it feels like. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Because remember, bliss, living your bliss is you becoming who you can be, what you came here to be. That's also an act of creation. And it's what you love to do. So it's serendipitous that our 3-part series on bliss, the abyss, and home base, like the diamond and the alm of life, was followed up now by love and sex and creation, because the two things go hand in hand. The two things go hand in hand. And when you think about it, the thing about the pentagram here, and why we practice the pentagram, which is also the tetragram, but the pentagram and the tetragram form 9, but the pentagram and the law of 3 is 8. And 8, the holy 8, is infinity. It's all connected. It's all connected.